When I told my son I lost my job, he arrived with legal papers. Sign here. It legally separates our finances. When you die broke, your debts stay yours. I won't be dragged down by a loser. Hurt but resolute, I signed everything. Little did he know, I'd just inherited a staggering $900 million fortune, and his actions had unleashed a plan he couldn't possibly fathom. If you're intrigued, stick around and let me know where you're following this story from. Let's rewind a few days to where it all began. 3 days prior, I was shelving returned books at the Millfield Public Library when Mrs. Henderson, the head librarian, summoned me to her office. At 67, I'd been a part-time fixture there for 8 years, a quiet pursuit after my husband passed, a way to fill the aching void. "Margaret," she began, her gaze avoiding mine, "due to unforeseen budget constraints, we're forced to eliminate your position. Today will be your last day." 8 years, evaporated in an instant. They handed me a flimsy cardboard box and granted a mere 15 minutes to clear my desk. The drive back to my humble apartment felt like navigating a crumbling landscape. My meager Social Security barely covered the rent, and the library job sustained me with groceries and utilities. But that evening, fate intervened in the most extraordinary way. The mail carrier delivered a certified letter, postmarked from Switzerland. Inside, a formal letter from a prestigious law firm announced that my great-aunt Beatrice, a woman I'd only encountered once at a distant family reunion some 30 years prior, had passed away, bequeathing to me her entire estate. The sum was so colossal, it nearly knocked me off my feet. $900 million. I reread the letter, convinced of a clerical error, but the lawyers were undeniably real, resolutely Swiss, and undeniably serious. Aunt Beatrice had amassed her wealth through astute investments in rare art and prime European real estate. Having never married nor borne children, she apparently recalled, with fondness, the solitary family member who'd shown a genuine interest in her beloved paintings during that reunion back in 1995. Elation should have surged through me. Instead, an unsettling calm settled over me as I carefully folded the letter and placed it inside my kitchen drawer. I resisted the urge to call anyone, to celebrate. Instead, I simply brewed a cup of tea and sat at my small table, contemplating how dramatically my existence had been altered. The following morning, David telephoned. "Mom, I heard about the library. Listen, I know this is difficult, but Patricia and I have given it considerable thought." Patricia, my daughter-in-law, whose presence always felt like an exercise in strained obligation. "We believe this could be a blessing in disguise, an opportunity for you to downsize and simplify your life." His veiled meaning: move somewhere more affordable so we're relieved of any potential responsibility. I assured him I was managing, that I would find a solution, but David has always possessed a stubborn conviction that he knows best. That's how I found myself answering the door the very next afternoon to my son, briefcase in hand, resembling an impending foreclosure notice. "We need to talk," he stated, bypassing me and stepping into my modest living room. "Patricia's been researching, and there exist legal mechanisms to shield families from financial burden. Prudent planning, Mom." With the precision of a seasoned businessman, which he was, he opened his briefcase. David was a successful insurance salesman, residing in a house triple the size of my apartment, enjoying European vacations while I meticulously clipped coupons. "These documents legally sever our financial ties," he explained, spreading the papers across my coffee table. "It ensures that when you inevitably find yourself unable to meet your financial obligations, when you require expensive medical intervention, when you pass away burdened by debt, none of that falls upon our shoulders." I stared at him, incredulous. "When I pass away burdened by debt?" "Mom, let's be realistic. You're 67, unemployed, relying on Social Security. The equation isn't complex." His tone was condescendingly patient, as if explaining basic arithmetic to a child. "Patricia has meticulously calculated your monthly expenditures against your income. You'll be insolvent within 2 years, 3 at most." Patricia, of course. She had dissected my poverty down to the last insignificant cent. "Sign here," he directed, pointing to the designated signature lines. It's simply responsible planning. When you die broke, your debts remain yours. I won't be dragged down by a loser." That single word struck me with the force of a physical blow. Loser. My own flesh and blood branding me a loser. Yet, I refrained from arguing, from shedding tears. I simply picked up the pen and signed each page as instructed. David observed with undisguised relief, undoubtedly convinced he had narrowly averted a financial catastrophe. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said, gathering the documents. This was the mature, responsible course of action. After he departed, I remained seated, a faint smile playing on my lips. David had irrevocably severed all financial connections between us, thereby rendering what transpired next entirely my own affair. The Swiss lawyers were awaiting my call. The ensuing conference call with the Swiss attorneys extended for a full 2 hours. I sat at my kitchen table, diligently taking notes in a simple composition book, feeling like a student again, struggling to grasp the enormity of my inheritance. The estate encompasses properties in Geneva, London, New York, and Monaco, Mr. Hoffman elaborated in his precise English, in addition to a significant art collection, including 3 previously undiscovered Van Gogh paintings. The liquid assets alone exceed $400 million in readily accessible cash, simply accumulating interest in various bank accounts. Mrs. Thompson, several immediate decisions must be made. An offer of $32 million has been tendered for the Monaco apartment. Do you wish to proceed with the sale? $32 million for a single apartment in a city I had never even visited? Not at this juncture, I responded, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. I would like to see it first. Following the call, I walked to my bathroom mirror and gazed at the reflection staring back. Same gray hair, same etched lines around blue eyes, the same woman who had been branded a loser only yesterday. Except now, that woman possessed a net worth approaching $1 billion. The irony was exquisite. I prepared a simple lunch, a can of soup, old habits die hard, and contemplated David, Patricia's meticulous calculations of my descent into poverty, and their eagerness to shield themselves from my perceived failure. They had no inkling of what was about to unfold. The next morning, I drove to Millfield's most reputable law office. Jonathan Walsh had expertly handled my husband's estate 8 years ago. He was a man of integrity and honesty, the kind who didn't inflate his fees, precisely the kind of representation I needed. "Margaret," he greeted warmly as his secretary ushered me in. "I heard about the library. I'm so sorry. How can I be of assistance?" I handed him the letter from Switzerland and watched as his expression transformed. His eyes widened, then narrowed with focused concentration as he reread it. "This appears to be entirely legitimate," he observed cautiously. "Have you verified this with the Swiss firm?" "Yesterday, a 2-hour conference call. It's real, Jonathan." He leaned back in his chair, visibly stunned. $900 million, give or take. "Margaret, do you comprehend the implications of this? You're among the wealthiest individuals in the state, perhaps in the entire country." I nodded. "And I require your assistance with something of considerable importance." For the next hour, I outlined my intentions. Jonathan listened intently, without interruption, occasionally raising an eyebrow in surprise, but never questioning my rationale. Finally, he leaned forward. "I can establish the shell companies you desire, facilitate the anonymous purchases, and set up the necessary trust funds. However, Margaret, are you certain about this approach? There exist more direct methods for resolving familial conflicts." "Jonathan, 3 days ago, my son compelled me to sign documents designed to protect himself from my perceived poverty. Yesterday, I discovered that I possess the means to acquire his company and terminate his employment without impacting my grocery budget. Directness is not my objective." A genuine smile broke across his face. "What you're proposing isn't merely legal, it's ingenious. I appreciate ingenuity." We spent another hour meticulously reviewing the details. By the time I departed his office, the foundation had been laid. Jonathan would oversee the American aspects, collaborating with the Swiss firm on the international complexities. A sense of tranquility washed over me as I drove home. In the years since Robert's passing, I had felt increasingly invisible. A widow occupying space, contributing nothing, slowly depleting savings that were never adequate. David and Patricia had treated me as a burden waiting to materialize. Well, the waiting was over. That evening, David telephoned to check on me. "How are you holding up, Mom? Have you started your job search yet?" "Actually, I'm doing quite well," I replied. "Better than well." That's the spirit. Patricia has been compiling listings for senior apartments, smaller, more affordable places. We thought perhaps this weekend we could tour some of them. Places where elderly individuals went to fade quietly into obscurity. "That's very thoughtful," I said, "but it's unnecessary. I won't be needing a smaller place." "Mom, we discussed this. You must be realistic about your situation." "Oh, I am being remarkably realistic about my situation, David. More realistic than you can possibly imagine." A pause followed. "What is that supposed to mean?" "Nothing significant. Simply that matters have a peculiar way of resolving themselves." After I ended the call, I contacted Switzerland. Mr. Hoffman answered promptly. "Mrs. Thompson, how may we assist you?" "I wish to arrange a transfer," I stated. $5 million to my American account. I have several acquisitions to make. $5 million as a starting point. In reality, pocket change when one possessed $900 million, but sufficient to initiate my plan, sufficient to remind my son precisely the magnitude of the error he had committed. The $5 million appeared in my account on Tuesday morning. I stared at my online banking statement, mesmerized by the numbers that seemed surreal. Yesterday, I had possessed $847. Today, I had the financial power to purchase a modest skyscraper. But first, I needed to conduct thorough research. I drove to the Millfield Coffee Company, set up my laptop at a secluded table. If anyone inquired, I was searching for employment. Technically, that wasn't entirely false. I was indeed seeking information about someone's employment. David was employed by Morrison Financial Services, a mid-sized insurance company specializing in commercial policies. He had been with the company for 8 years, progressively rising to the position of regional sales manager, earning a comfortable income. According to the company website, they handled policies for approximately 60% of the businesses within our county. More importantly, according to publicly accessible records, Morrison Financial was privately owned by the Morrison family, 3 brothers who had inherited the company from their father, precisely the type of family-owned business that might be persuaded to sell to the right buyer at the right price. I devoted 3 hours to researching Morrison Financial's revenue streams, client base, and market position. By the time I finished my second cup of coffee, I had a clear understanding of a stable, profitable company valued at approximately $12 million. Perfect. Next, I examined Patricia's interior design firm, Sophisticated Spaces, which operated from rented office space downtown, catering to upper-middle-class clientele. She had 3 employees and maintained a solid reputation. However, like the majority of small businesses, she operated on a client-to-client basis. According to her business filings, she cleared approximately $80,000 annually in profit. Also, perfect. Wednesday morning, I met with Jonathan Walsh again. He had had time to review my requests and posed several questions. "The Morrison acquisition will require time," he explained. "I've discreetly inquired through intermediaries. The family is intrigued but cautious. They wish to know the identity of the buyer." "What did you tell them?" "That my client represents European investors interested in expanding their American portfolio. It's sufficiently vague to be credible and sufficiently exotic to pique their interest." I smiled. "And Patricia's office building? Easier, I presume. The owner is eager to sell. Commercial real estate has been sluggish. Your offer of $2 million for a building valued at $1.3 million immediately captured his attention." "Excellent. Proceed with both offers, Jonathan." Jonathan hesitated. "I must ask, what is your ultimate objective here? You will own your son's company and your daughter-in-law's building. What then?" I recalled David's voice the other day, inquiring about my job search as if I were a charitable case, Patricia's meticulous calculation of my poverty, and the legal documents that had severed me from their lives the moment I became an inconvenience. Then I intend to teach them about consequences, Jonathan, about the ramifications of discarding family members because you deem them worthless. He nodded slowly. I understand. And if they apologize, if they acknowledge their mistake, they won't recognize anything until it's far too late. Individuals like David and Patricia don't offer apologies until the damage has already been irrevocably done. Thursday afternoon, I received my initial confirmation. The owner of Patricia's office building had accepted my offer. By next week, I would be Patricia's landlord. I celebrated by purchasing groceries without scrutinizing the prices. Small acts of rebellion, but immensely satisfying. Friday brought a call from David. Mom, how is the apartment hunting progressing? I've decided against moving, I stated. What? Mom, we discussed this. You cannot afford to remain where you are. I can afford anything I desire, David. Silence then, carefully. What does that mean? It means that I'm perfectly fine. It means that you need not concern yourself with me becoming a financial burden. Are you seeing someone? His voice became sharper. Mom, please tell me you haven't fallen prey to some romance scam. Elderly individuals are frequently targeted. Elderly individuals, as if I were a senile fool easily manipulated. No romance scam, David. I'm simply not the charity case you presume me to be. Then where does this newfound confidence stem from? 3 days ago, you were unemployed and fearful. I smiled, gazing out my apartment window at the town where I had resided for 40 years, the town where Margaret Thompson was known as the quiet widow who worked at the library. Soon, they would know her for something far more. I received some unexpectedly positive news, I said. My circumstances have improved dramatically. What type of positive news? The type that alters everything. After I ended the call, I contacted Jonathan. Any word from Morrison Financial? They wish to meet next week. They are very interested, but they seek assurances regarding financing and the buyer's intentions. Inform them that the buyer intends to honor all existing contracts and maintain current operations. No layoffs, no restructuring. That should reassure them. Margaret, they are now requesting $14 million. Apparently, word of the European interest has spread, and they are testing the market. $14 million instead of $12 million. I almost chuckled. Accede to their price, I instructed. But I want the sale finalized within 30 days. That is an extremely aggressive timeline for a transaction of this magnitude. Jonathan, I possess $900 million earning interest in Swiss banks. $14 million is the equivalent of my coffee budget. The next week would undoubtedly bring some compelling conversations. Patricia would discover that her rent had been substantially increased. David would learn that his company had been acquired by new owners, but they still wouldn't know the most pivotal detail of all. They wouldn't realize that the woman they had dismissed as a loser was on the verge of becoming their boss. Monday morning, Patricia called me, her voice filled with tears. Margaret, something dreadful has occurred. My landlord sold the building to some obscure foreign investment company, and they're tripling my rent. $3,000 a month. I can't afford that. I made sympathetic noises while stirring my coffee. Through Jonathan's shell company, I was now Patricia's landlord. The rent increase was perfectly legal. Her lease was month to month, and I had given proper notice. That's terrible, dear. Have you spoken to them? I attempted to call, but they refused to negotiate. The property management company asserts that the new owners are determined to maximize the investment potential of the building. Her voice broke. I don't know what to do. I'll be forced to relocate, but there's nothing available in my price range downtown. Moving elsewhere would mean losing the majority of my clients. I'm so sorry this is happening. David believes I should ask you for assistance with the deposit on a new place, but I vehemently refused. You have enough to worry about with your own situation. How considerate. They wouldn't ask me for money because they believed I was destitute. Have you considered expanding your business? I asked innocently. Perhaps this is an opportunity to think on a larger scale. With what capital, Margaret? I'm barely managing to keep the business afloat as it is. This rent increase will destroy me. After Patricia ended the call, I contacted Jonathan. How is the Morrison acquisition progressing? More rapidly than anticipated. The family is highly motivated. Apparently, one of the brothers wishes to retire, and buying out his share was financially burdening the other two. Your offer resolves multiple problems for them. Excellent. And my other request, the background checks on David's client list, are they complete? Very informative reading. Jonathan had investigated David's sales record and client relationships, not to inflict harm, but to accurately assess his professional capabilities. The conclusion was moderately successful, but not irreplaceable. David possessed charm and persistence, but several of his key accounts had expressed dissatisfaction with his service. Most significantly, his largest client, Hartwell Manufacturing, had been contemplating switching insurance providers for months. What have you discovered regarding Hartwell? They have been dissatisfied with response times and claim processing. David has been managing the relationship, but just barely. One more service failure, and they will likely seek a new provider. Perfect. I want you to arrange a lunch with Mr. Hartwell. Inform him that you represent a European insurance company interested in acquiring clients in the American market. Margaret, you cannot poach your son's clients. I'm not poaching anything. I'm offering superior service. Business is business, correct? Isn't that what David would say? Tuesday afternoon, David called with his own crisis. Mom, something strange is happening at work. The owners are selling the company to some European conglomerate. It materialized out of nowhere. That sounds potentially exciting, I said. New opportunities. I don't know. Nobody knows anything except that the sale is happening very fast. Mr. Morrison claims the new owners intend to maintain the status quo, but you understand how these things operate. New ownership invariably results in changes. I'm confident you'll be fine. You're proficient at what you do. Yes, but am I proficient enough by European standards? These people may possess entirely different expectations. I almost felt a pang of sympathy for him. Almost. Wednesday brought a delightful development. Mr. Hartwell agreed to meet with Jonathan to discuss transferring his company's insurance needs. The meeting was scheduled for Friday at the country club. Thursday evening, Patricia called again, her tone even more desperate. Margaret, I have until Friday to decide whether to sign the new lease or vacate the premises. The property management company refuses to compromise on the rent. David believes I should secure a loan to cover the difference, but the bank won't approve me for a sufficient amount. What will you do? I don't know. I may be forced to close the business, start anew somewhere cheaper, outside of town. The defeat in her voice was unmistakable. Patricia, who had meticulously calculated my financial demise, was now confronting her own. I'm sorry this is so difficult. The most agonizing aspect is the timing. I had finally generated some momentum, secured some valuable clients. Mrs. Richardson just contracted me to redecorate her entire house, a $50,000 project. But if I'm forced to relocate, I'll lose her and everyone else. After she ended the call, I sat in my chair contemplating Patricia. She wasn't inherently malicious, merely insensitive. She had never considered that her calculations regarding my poverty might inflict harm. In her perception, she was simply being practical, realistic, and prudent. Now, she was experiencing what it felt like to have someone else dictate your financial destiny. Friday afternoon, Jonathan called with an update. Morrison Financial is officially sold, paperwork completed, funds transferred. You now own David's company and Hartwell Manufacturing. Mr. Hartwell was greatly impressed with our proposal. He is prepared to transition insurance providers immediately. He inquired when we could assume responsibility for his policy. Inform him Monday. And Jonathan, I want David to be the one who must contact Hartwell and inform him of the account transition. Margaret, that's simply business. David will be adhering to company protocol, informing clients of service alterations. There's nothing inappropriate about that. I ended the call and prepared dinner, humming softly to myself. Tomorrow was Saturday. David and Patricia would spend the weekend agonizing over their futures, oblivious to the fact that their fates were entirely in my hands. On Monday, David would arrive at work to meet his new boss. Patricia would have to decide whether to pay exorbitant rent or abandon the business she had painstakingly built, and I would still be perceived as their impoverished, unemployed mother, the loser they had legally separated from their lives, for now. Monday morning, I carefully selected my best navy blue dress and drove to Morrison Financial Services. It was time to meet my employees. David's car was already parked in the lot when I arrived at 9 a.m. Through Jonathan's arrangements, I was scheduled to meet with the management team at 9:30 to introduce myself as the representative of the new ownership group. I lingered in my car for a few minutes, observing David through the office windows. He was seated at his desk, presumably reviewing client files, preparing for what he assumed would be a normal day. In 30 minutes, his world would be turned upside down. Jonathan greeted me at the front door. "Ready for this?" "I've been ready since he called me a loser." The conference room held 6 individuals, the 3 Morrison brothers who were staying on temporarily to facilitate the transition, David, another sales manager named Robert, and Sarah from accounting. They all stood as Jonathan and I entered. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jonathan announced, "I would like to introduce Mrs. Margaret Thompson, representing the new ownership." David's face registered a rapid succession of emotions: confusion, disbelief, then something bordering on panic. "Mom?" His voice was barely audible. "Hello, David. Surprised to see me?" The Morrison brothers exchanged uncertain glances. "You two know each other?" asked the eldest, Frank Morrison. "Mrs. Thompson is my mother," David stated weakly. "What a delightful coincidence," I said smoothly. I was entirely unaware that David worked here when my associates recommended Morrison Financial as a potential acquisition target. That was technically accurate. I had known David worked there, but my associates had indeed recommended it after I had instructed them to do so. "Mom, I don't understand. How are you representing investors? You recently lost your job at the library." I offered him the same patient smile he had extended to me when explaining why I was destined to die broke. "David, my circumstances have undergone a recent and quite dramatic transformation." Frank Morrison cleared his throat. "Should we postpone this meeting given the family connection?" "Not at all," I responded. "Business is business. Isn't that correct, David?" For the next hour, I reviewed operations with the management team. Morrison Financial was precisely as I had anticipated: stable, profitable, but lacking a forward-thinking vision, ideally suited for my purposes. "I want to reassure everyone that there will be no immediate changes," I announced. "Salaries will remain consistent, benefits unchanged, and all existing client relationships will be honored." "What about long-term plans?" asked Robert. "We will be investing in technological upgrades and expanded services. The objective is growth, not cost reduction." David had remained silent since his initial shock. So there you have it. Margaret's story is really about more than just revenge. It's about resilience, about finding your power when you think you have none left, and about the enduring, sometimes complicated bonds of family. But the game is far from over. In part 2, we'll see how Margaret navigates her new position, how David and Patricia react to the unfolding events, and whether this incredible twist of fate can ultimately lead to reconciliation. What do you think will happen next? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment down below. What are your predictions? Do you have any questions about Margaret's plan? Let's start a conversation. And most importantly, if you enjoyed this and want to find out what happens next, be sure to subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss part 2, and you'll get notified whenever I upload new stories. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.